6 different people from 6 different continents.
That's crazy.
You are representing North America, and your name is Christian Scott, and it's brilliant to have you here. So you come from New Orleans. So give me a bit of your upbringing, your history.
How I came into the
and New Orleans and its importance to you.
So I'm born into one of the musical houses in New Orleans. My grandfather's a guy named Big Chief Donald Harrison Sr. He's the only man to be a chieftain of 4 different clans or tribes of Black Indians, Afro-Native Americans in Louisiana. And so my uncle's been chief for 20 years. I was just coronated as chief this year. So a lot of my life is changing, but when I'm looking back and thinking about those experiences, I think musically there's no place I would have rather grown up based on what I saw. I was the beneficiary of, being able to be around guys like Doc Cheatham and Dejan and all of these, landmark musicians from, some of the first generation, or if not the first, the second generation of practitioners in the culture of music, jazz. I grew up around the folk music or the core music that actually created that music, what that was actually born out of, which is out of the traditions of Congo Square. That space was sort of a mashup for all of the West Africans that one way or another, obviously some through the slavery experience, some not, made their way into New Orleans and started to mix cultures. New Orleans is also a place where you had the Code Noir and the Black Codes, and during Reconstruction, there were laws that made it illegal for Blacks to procreate with whites, and so it sort of made the bonds between African descent people and also Native descent people stronger. And this group of people actually created this music, right? You can go on line if you'd like and look up, interviews with people like Baby Dodds or Louis Armstrong, and they talk about the great chieftain that would be in Congo Square and holding the practice and all this and all of the music that was created out of there. Pop said that a lot of times the things that the trumpet players would play would sound like the singing of the chiefs. So I was really fortunate in that I grew up in a family environment where the music served the culture in some of the most beautiful ways that you could serve a culture musically. As soon as you get out of the airport, you can feel there's something palpable there, especially in sound, in vibration, that's completely different than any other place in the world because of the contributions of all of the different, seemingly disparate cultural groups that actually hold the same heart. And you can feel it there in a way that you don't in other places.
Do you feel that you're representing New Orleans when you leave the town? What's the relationship?
Yeah, I feel like I carry a big part of that culture with me everywhere that I go. What we do with stretch music, the music that we create, comes out of a very New Orleanian environment and looks to sort of change things and sort of uproot some ideas. So like when I'm a little boy, I grew up in the Ninth Ward, New Orleans, right, which most people know is the area that was affected the most by the storm. But the neighborhood I grew up in had a schoolhouse in it called William Frantz Elementary School, right? This is the first desegregated school in the United States. I could pitch a rock and hit it from my neighborhood, right, that close. But growing up in an environment like that in the 80s, early 80s when I'm born, it's sort of a fractured cultural moment. So you have whites on one side of the track, blacks on another side of the track. And part of what I'm seeing is, I'm seeing whites that are going through food insecurity, right? I'm seeing blacks that are going through food insecurity. I'm seeing white families that have children that have kids that are being undereducated so they can be a labor class. I'm seeing black families go through the same thing. So as a little boy, I'm growing up, I'm in this neighborhood, I'm looking around, and part of what I'm realizing is feeding this idea of us being sort of antagonizing forces and nemesis is how music is being disseminated to these cultures, who are essentially the same people, right, because of what they're enduring. Our idea was if we can create a sonic landscape that can mix the tenets of traditional Korean music with the rhythms of the Saramakan in French Guyana, with the fervor of the Delta blues and maybe a harmonic precept that comes from like an Indian raga, then what are we saying about the people, right? That they belong together and that they are one and that marriage should happen. But these are very New Orleanian ideas actually, right?
Do other parts of America sort of, are they very inspired by New Orleans in that way?
Yeah, I think the root of all of the music that popular music certainly has come out of this space. The meeting of those rhythms and that fervor that exists in that culture of music has created 100 years worth of dialogue musically. I'm pretty sure most of the records that we're looking at in here, if we pull them out in one way or another, there's something that we can find that actually harkens back to New Orleans, right, on one way or another.
What's your role as a kind of global ambassador? What do you feel your role is?
I've had to reevaluate the way that I see everything, right? Because it's not just me walking into these spaces anymore. I'm responsible for community, right? And what we've tried to do in those spaces, obviously, to create music that has a sense of love and welcome, like we spoke before, but also to force people to reevaluate having singular narratives of people. A lot of times you go to these spaces and people have kind of concluded that they know everything there is to know about you if you're like a black guy, right? And I've always thought that it made more sense to deal with the identity politics thing and to touch on to those things in a way that has like some grace and beauty and kind of opens people up in a way. So my jewelry, my fashion, all this stuff is designed. And when you see this stuff, if you're looking at something that you've never seen before, like an Indonesian or Burmese torque necklace, and these rings are from Senegal and Gambia, if you're looking at these things and you don't know what they are, it forces you to ask a question. And that questioning creates more questions, which makes you conclude and you see me as a person because now you're interested in me as opposed to just this shell of this idea that you have about people. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach to trying to break this stuff down and to build something beautiful.
Christian, thank you.
You kidding? Thank you. No, thank
Cheers,
you.
man.